Afternoon, everyone. I'm Eylon Levy, an Israeli government spokesman. Thank you for joining us. First, a brief update, and then I will take your questions. Since declaring war on Israel with the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired over 9,500 rockets at Israel. Since the start of the massacre, over 1,200 Israelis have been killed, over 7,200 injured. The IDF has notified the families of 363 soldiers that their loved ones fell in battle, as well as 59 members of the police forces. The hostage count in Gaza is now at least 239, including nationals of 27 different nations. Today's operational update. The IDF continues its efforts to undermine Hamas's human shield strategy by moving Gazan civilians away from Hamas. Today marks 1 month since Israel started urging Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza to evacuate south temporarily for their safety, so Hamas cannot use them as human shields. Today, the IDF secured our regular humanitarian corridor for 7 hours, and 200,000 Gazans have used it since November 5th. We also implemented a local tactical pause between 10 and 2 o'clock today in Rafah for civilians to evacuate. The IDF continues to conduct raids on the outskirts of the Al-Shati area, targeting terrorist infrastructure embedded in civilian areas, including the Al-Quds University. In the Abu Bakr Mosque, troops uncovered an explosives warehouse, and in the home of a senior Islamic Jihad terrorist, they found weapons hidden in a children's room. We are exposing Hamas's war crimes. Yesterday saw a record 143 humanitarian aid trucks enter Gaza through Egypt after Israeli inspection. That includes food, medical equipment, water, and shelters. We are increasing the provision of humanitarian aid and increasing pressure on Hamas at the same time. As in every briefing, I want to draw attention to the hostages in Gaza who have now been held for 38 days. This is Ophir Engel. October 7th was his 18th birthday and his first day as a Hamas hostage. Ophir was visiting Kibbutz Be'eri with his girlfriend. He was able to text his family till 1:30 in the afternoon, and then the line went dark. Hamas death squads broke into the safe room and kidnapped Ophir, his girlfriend's father, and another 16-year-old. Before taking them into Gaza, the terrorists also executed a family dog. That sheer evil of kidnapping a teenager, of shooting pets, must be eradicated. This is why we are fighting Hamas, to remove this kind of evil from the world. And we repeat our demand for the international community to apply all pressure on Hamas and its supporters to release all the hostages immediately and unconditionally. Israel is continuing to peel away Hamas's layers of human shields and protect Gazan civilians, despite Hamas attacking our soldiers doing so. Yesterday, the IDF delivered 300 liters of fuel to the hospital above the Shifa terror compound. Hamas prevented medical staff from receiving it, the same Hamas that regularly steals fuel from the same hospital. We are distressed and heartbroken by images of human suffering in the hospital as a result of Hamas diverting fuel to its underground bunkers instead of releasing it for vulnerable patients. Hamas prefers ventilating tunnels under the hospitals instead of fueling hospital ventilators. Hamas is deliberately depriving hospitals of power in a sick strategy to intensify its attacks on Israel. Hamas prefers to keep its hospitals without power and to keep its hold on power without functioning hospitals. Israel is helping to evacuate babies in Gaza. Hamas is holding ours hostage. That is the difference between us and them. And we wish that international agencies and media concerned for the plight of babies in Gaza demonstrated the same anguish for the Israeli babies Hamas has been holding hostage for 38 days. Hamas leaders have said openly in recent weeks that they are happy to sacrifice their civilians as martyrs. That is a strategy that we are working tirelessly to thwart by keeping Palestinian civilians safe from Hamas. Just today, terrorists embedded among civilians at the entrance of the Al-Quds hospital fired at our troops and then retreated back into the hospital. We returned fire and killed nearly 24 terrorists. Israel welcomes the important European Union statement condemning Hamas's strategy of using hospitals and civilians as human shields. We expect the whole international community, and especially the humanitarian agencies on the ground, to do the same. We call on the International Red Cross, the World Health Organization, UN OCHA, UNRWA, and others to join this condemnation of Hamas's illegal use of hospitals to shield its military targets. We are waiting to hear that condemnation. When ISIS terrorists occupied medical facilities in Iraq and Syria, Human Rights Watch said clearly This undermines their protected status under international law and places civilians at risk. The same law applies to Hamas and the medical facilities it is exploiting in Gaza. I think when the IDF exposes the full extent of Hamas's takeover of the Shifa hospital, a lot of international agencies in Gaza and NGOs are going to look very, very silly as people rightfully ask, what did you know? Why did you not say anything? We expect there to be full accountability for any complicity by international actors, even through their silence, with Hamas's despicable strategy of using hospitals and clinics for terrorist activities. We hold Hamas responsible for all tragic civilian deaths in Gaza, those killed by its misfired rockets, and those killed after it prevented them from evacuating. But international agencies also need to take a long, hard look in the mirror about their tacit complicity with Hamas's human shield strategy. Their international credibility is at stake. We'll now take your questions. Please put up your hand or type any questions in the chat. While we're waiting, a reminder, if you have any questions, would like verification, or want to connect with various officials and sources, please contact us at desk@pressoffice.co.il or at +972 53 303 3635. Do we have any questions, please? Gwen from Bloomberg, how are you?
Hey, Eylon, how are you? I have a question. There was a foreign news company that cited Gallant saying that the Hamas activists sought out approval from the imams to rape women. And then when they came across on October 7th, actually raped them. Since the defense ministry actually said that he was misquoted, but I wanted to know, since this is becoming a very big question now in the next few days and people are talking about it, does the prime ministry have any idea if this is true, if they any confirmation of the rapes, any confirmation that they actually sought approval from their religious leaders to do this, because it's actually forbidden by Islam?
Thank you, Gwen. A very important question, of course, shining a light on the horrific use of sexual violence and acts of rape and sexual abuse during the October 7th massacre, one of the more distressing and disturbing manifestations of that massacre. As for the specific question of whether Hamas sought approval from imams, I'm not familiar with that report, but we'll look into it and get back to you. Coach Winehouse?
Yes, thank you very much. Just responding to your statements about taking a long, hard look at some of the international relief organizations, you suggest there should be accountability. And my question is who do you envision holding them accountable? And can you give some examples of how they would be held accountable?
We think that the international community, member states of the United Nations, should be asking very tough questions of the international agencies on the ground about what they knew about Hamas's exploitation of medical facilities to shield military targets in a way that puts them at risk of losing their protected status under international law. They should ask them tough questions about what they knew and ask them why they didn't say anything. Ultimately, we are suffering from the failure of these organizations to operate effectively in protecting civilians inside the Gaza Strip, and instead deflecting blame on Israel instead of the terrorist organization using human shields. But international institutions that are not doing their job properly are a problem not only for the state of Israel, but for the international architecture and rules-based order in general. And so we would expect other countries that also rely on the moral and legal authority of UN agencies to ask serious questions about why in all these years they have not said anything about what is the biggest open secret in the Gaza Strip, that Hamas has embedded itself underneath hospitals and exploits ambulances to continue to conduct terrorist activities.
Thank you.
Jim?
Hey, Eylon. Thanks for taking my question. One of the big concerns here in the United States is what's going on with Hezbollah in the north. And it's quite possible that if things continue, looks like at least U.S. air power will be getting involved. Do you have any updates on what's going on in the northern front?
First of all, we welcome the presence of the two U.S. aircraft, battle aircraft carriers. They send a very important message of deterrence to anyone thinking of getting into the conflict. Don't, as President Biden said in that iconic statement. We have been clear, we are still not interested in fighting a war on two or on multiple fronts. We're focusing on destroying the terror group that perpetrated the October 7th massacre. And our message to Hezbollah remains the same. If it insists on dragging Israel into a full war to defend its people, it will be making the mistake of its lifetime. And I would refer you to remarks that the Prime Minister said just today at meeting troops. Hezbollah is playing with fire, and fire will be met with stronger fire. We urge the call on Hezbollah, of course, to stop its blatant aggression against Israel, to stop attacking our people and stop attacking our troops. We're not interested in fighting on two fronts at the same time, but if we have to, the IDF is more ready than it's ever been, and we will fight and we will win.
Thank you.
Gwen, your hand's still up. Is this a new question or?
Sorry. I thought it went down by itself. Sorry.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anyone in the chat? Or else I think we're going to have to wrap up a little bit early today. Steve? We'll have time for one more question. Steve.
Okay, fine. Listen, thank you, first of all. Secondly, when the Prime Minister talks about an indefinite security control over the Gaza Strip, is he thinking about Area B or Area A? I mean, can you be more specific about what you mean? Sorry.
A question about the day after Hamas. Unfortunately, the day after Hamas is not immediately in sight. We know that the war ahead is going to be long and it's going to be difficult because of the way that Hamas has spent the last 16 years embedding itself in civilian areas. This is going to be a very complicated operation. We're looking at several options with our international partners for the day after Hamas. It's premature to discuss specifics, but the broad outlines are clear. 3 principles must govern the arrangement for the Gaza Strip the day after this war. 1, the Gaza Strip must be demilitarized. It can never again host the sort of military or terrorist presence able to menace our people, fire rockets at our cities, or abduct our people. The days of the Gaza Strip as a military security threat to Israel will end with Israel's victory in this war. The second point is that the Gaza Strip must be de-radicalized. Because for many years, Hamas, with the involvement of international agencies, and we're speaking specifically about UNRWA, has raised generations on a diet of hate and radicalism and not educated them towards a future of peace and reconciliation. When we talk about UNRWA, for example, the Palestinians' own tailor-made refugee agency, telling 70% of Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip that they are refugees, even though they were never displaced from anywhere, haven't been displaced for 4 generations, telling them that they're refugees and that one day they have a right to return and live in the sovereign state of Israel instead of building safe and secure homes inside the Gaza Strip, that only contributes towards more radicalism. And we need the whole international community to be on board in supporting serious de-radicalization inside the Gaza Strip, just as Germany and Japan underwent extreme processes of de-radicalization after the Second World War, and now they're both prosperous democratic countries and US allies. And the third principle, of course, is that the Gaza Strip will be rebuilt, and we hope that the world will learn its lessons from 2014 and the last major push for reconstruction in the Gaza Strip, when so many of those materials were diverted towards Hamas's war machine. Where else did the cement come from that Hamas is using for all its maze of tunnels underground? And the Gaza Strip must be rebuilt in a way that ensures that we're building genuine civilian infrastructure for the people of Gaza and for civilians, and none of that is exploited to use for military purposes again. But as for the specifics of what the arrangements are going to look like, it is still very premature, and we'll have those discussions in the due course of time.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much. We will send an update tomorrow what time the daily briefing will be. Everyone, keep safe. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.